Coming to you from Jonesborough, Tennessee, the storytelling capital of the world, and broadcasting from the International Storytelling Center, it's Jonesborough's original storytelling radio hour, A Night with the Yarn Exchange. And we are back with a great season of stories.
That's right, Lori. Telling the stories of our own people from right here in the Appalachian region. Each month, we go into the hills and hollers and collect the stories we use on this show.
We take those old stories and bring them to life right here on the stage at the International Storytelling Center. Some we've never heard before. Some are told in a whole new way. I guess what we do every show really fits in well with this month's theme. What's new, used, or recycled?
You know, Lori, you might look at Jonesborough, a town established in 1779, and think, well, nothing new to be found there.
But oh no, not in this town. Sure, our main street has buildings going back to the 1700s. Like our wonderful Chester Inn next door, which you'll hear more about later on in the show. And we've got buildings from the 1800s, 1900s, and well, right up to the 21st century. But Jonesborough is Tennessee's ultimate recycling story. We've continuously put our buildings into new use generation after generation.
The town is alive. The people, the ideas, the streets, the buildings. And while the history of the place is preserved, the original spirit of Jonesborough inhabits them all.
We've also been collecting stories at the newly restored McKinney Center, located in the historic Booker T. Washington School, a building that has been brought into new use.
Before we go any further, though, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors whose generous support has allowed us to celebrate the beginning of our 6th year.
Our program is made possible by generous support from Mountain States Health Alliance. Medical experts you can trust with world-class facilities and the latest technology close to home.
We'd also like to thank the Tennessee Arts Commission for their support for our program.
I also want to mention that our musical guest tonight is here all the way from Buffalo, South Carolina. He's Piedmont blues artist Freddie Vanderford, here with Brandon Turner on guitar. They perform as the Legacy Duo. I've got to tell you, it is great to have them back on the show tonight.
And yes, of course, as always, the makers of parsley. Yes, parsley, that smooth, easygoing flavor that enhances every meal. Sprinkle it on or garnish a dish.
It just tastes better with parsley.
Moms, do mornings come too early for you? Well then, frozen toast is the answer. From the freezer to the toaster, what could be simpler than frozen toast? Hit it, kids.
What do you want for breakfast, kids? Frozen toast.
about what's new, used, and recycled. And who would know more about what's been used and recycled right here in our own town than Angie Fellers-Mason from the Heritage Alliance of Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. And why don't you come on up here and give us another installment of our favorite segment, Ask the Historian.
Thanks, Lori. Life cycle. Every living creature has one, from the tallest person to the smallest caterpillar, and so on. Buildings, too, have life cycles. They are built for a purpose. Sometimes they change owners many times. Sometimes their purpose changes. And sometimes they are deemed purposeless and torn down. In 1905, when Ray Lodge number 47 of Free and Accepted Masons built their new lodge at 129 East Main Street, they probably never entertained the idea that 100-some years later, it would be selling candy as a lollipop shop. If you visited the current location of Kaylee's in the 1930s, instead of clothes, you could have bought a car. And if you stopped at the Boone Street Market in the 1990s, you'd be stopping to fill your car at the Exxon station. The buildings in Jonesborough have lived multiple lives, and it helps that Jonesborough is a historic district. Historic preservation can greatly increase the longevity of a structure. The greenest building is always an old building that finds a new purpose. Of course, Jonesborough wasn't always a historic district, and even before those days, there were people in town who worked to keep Jonesborough's buildings standing. The Chester Inn, Jonesborough's oldest commercial building, has had a very long life cycle indeed. Built circa 1797, Dr. Chester obtained permission to keep a public house in 1799. That same year, 2 Moravian missionaries passing through recorded that the innkeeper with whom we stopped looked after an apothecary shop as well as the inn. It was here, too, that in May of 1800, John Sevier was said to have tarried for a while. The inn expanded around 1836, the beautiful porch was added in the 1880s, and the business changed hands and names numerous times. The Bell Tavern, where guests knew it was time to come and eat when a large bell was sounded. The Union Hotel during the Civil War, the Planter's House, and then the Jonesborough Inn. The downstairs, which began as Dr. Chester's apothecary shop, also saw many changes. It's been a barber shop, a sandwich shop, a candy shop. Many businesses and offices have been down there, and for a long time, it was home to the Jonesborough Public Library. By the 1950s, the building was showing its age, and a group of people, led by Charles Bennett, remodeled the inn into apartments. This renovation greatly changed the building, but it also helped to save it and give it a new purpose. By 1989, the age was showing again, and that's when the state of Tennessee stepped in and acquired the property. Fortunately, the wonderful people behind the Storytelling Festival were there to care for the building and give it another new purpose as an office building. Today, the Chester Inn State Historic Site and Museum welcomes guests once more with exhibits on the ground level and restored rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors. It is our privilege and honor as a Heritage Alliance to oversee this current phase of the building's life. When Dr. Chester built the inn those many years ago, he surely could not have foreseen that all these years later, his building would still be standing and it would still be an integral part of the community. When I stand in the building today, I wonder what stories people will tell of it 200 years from now.
Jonesborough has so many buildings that tell a story, large and small. My home is one of them. But when we bought the house, it was a wreck and needed to be gutted.
Everything had to be redone. The whole structure needed new work. New ductwork, new wiring, new everything.
Why didn't you just buy a new house?
That's a good question, Chelsea. The answer is, we like using old stuff and the history of old Jonesborough. We really prefer old over new.
Even if it's a lot of work?
Yes, Chelsea. Remember your favorite blanket? When it was worn and torn, you didn't want me to get you a new blanket. You wanted me to sew your old blanket.
Because it was Yellow Blanky. I love Yellow Blanky. We can't get rid of Yellow Blanky. It's my favorite.
Exactly. Just like your blankie was your favorite, The house that Deb and Dunn live in, it was once someone's favorite too. Someone built it by hand over 100 years ago.
And even though it didn't start out as our favorite, well, we weren't even born yet when the house was built. But we could see when we looked at it, within the structure, the love and care that someone had put into it.
Painstakingly put into it. But we'll get to that next.
Once we got the main structural work completed, like the wiring and plumbing, it was time to work on the design. Now the first thing you have to understand is that we hate sheetrock. So it was our goal to redo the entire house without using sheetrock.
That meant a stop at where I volunteer 2 Saturdays a month during the spring through the fall. The Heritage Alliance Salvage Warehouse. Talk about reuse and recycle. The Salvage Warehouse serves all of the Tri-Cities and the larger Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia region. We offer a wide selection of materials, including bricks, doors, windows, mantles, shutters, flooring, and more. I'm not talking about things that you could find at home remodeling stores. The Salvage Warehouse is filled with items that have come from historic homes in the region and that are being either remodeled and in some sad cases, taken down. In those instances, we salvaged these items and we've gotten some really great pieces. My favorite was a huge clawfoot bathtub. Oh, and I also love the old stained glass window panels we often get. The Salvage Warehouse is a great place to go to find items if you're doing a restoration project. We also serve as a place to take donations if you are remodeling and want to pass on a piece of history for someone else to use in their own home. The year that the Bergers were redoing their home, I saw them every other Saturday, all summer long.
We have a 1785 door, oddly proportioned. It won't work in any modern doorway, so it hangs on a wall that had some bad plaster. And it serves as a rotating panel. Deb and I are both artists, and we hang seasonal artwork on it now.
Yeah, it's not the panel that rotates, it's the artwork that's displayed on it. But we also bought an entire porch from an old farmhouse. Spindles, pillars, banisters, balusters. Some were old and worn, and some were quite new looking. We used all of them all over the house. In one area, we had to take down a weight-bearing wall, and we put that old weathered farmhouse pillar there in its place. So that section of the home is held up by something from the 1850s.
We love the history and the look of old wood, so we didn't sand and refinish. We just flaked off what was loose and sealed off what was left. You can just see the life in these old pieces, the life they have lived.
One of the coolest things we discovered in places where we had to take off the old siding, which was in layers. First there was the plain vanilla vinyl siding, and underneath that was some hideous white asbestos shingle. And the bottom layer, the original, when we got down to the original siding of the house, we discovered, well, we weren't sure what we would find.
What we found was a wooden siding put on in the 1920s that was routed by hand to look like brick. Imagine routing by hand the entire exterior of a home to look like individual bricks.
Yeah, it's stained red, dark red like brick, and the notches where the grout would be if it really was brick, those have all been painstakingly painted with brush strokes of white. That's the whole siding of the house underneath the asbestos. It's old though, and it's wooden, and in some places damaged, and we really couldn't strip down and use it. It doesn't have modern vapor barrier and insulation and stuff. But there were places where we had to take it off, so we carefully preserved it, and even though we couldn't use it on the outside.
But we really loved the artistry it took to do that. So we took off wood siding from the exterior and used it as the interior kitchen wall. The colors don't all match because they came from different parts of the house that got different light over the years. And that's perfect too.
I thought it was real brick. I've been over there for dinner many times before I got up close to it one day. I looked really closely and touched it, but I was so surprised it wasn't brick. I could see the hand-painted white brush strokes used for the grout. A real artist did that. Then I knew that's why Deb had moved into this house. It was filled with an artist's soul.
We have a friend in salvage in North Carolina, in addition to the Heritage Alliance warehouse here. He gets called to take apart old buildings all over the Southeast. We have a long-standing barter back and forth agreement with him. Well, a few years ago, he took down the Peter Vitale billiard table factory in western North Carolina. They had been a source for handcrafted high-end billiard tables that sold for 5 figures to, upscale clubs and very wealthy people. All the tables had scroll work and fancy carving, partly finished, and it was all left exactly where it was in whatever state of completion the day the factory suddenly closed. We bought several of those pieces, and some of them are now in use in our house.
With billiard tables like this, on the end of the table, on the outside, there's frequently a frieze, a carving under the lip of the table. We have one that was nearly finished, rough at one end with chisel marks, and smooth and finished at the other. It's a beautiful piece of carved wood, and it was almost exactly the width of French doors from somewhere else to our bedroom, and we hung that above the doors.
Our kitchen sink came from Jonesborough, from West Main Street, from the Cox house. It's a huge cast iron painted with porcelain, 2 big deep wash sinks and a smaller one in the middle, 4 feet wide. Now one thing, Jonesborough homes are distinctive, and we had friends over when we were nearing the end of the restoration, and glimmers of recognition were heard.
Oh, that sink looks familiar. Isn't that the one from the house up the street?
It was recognized right away.
Our bathroom door is an 1840s house door, a panel door with original green milk paint. You need a lock on the bathroom, so we picked up a World War I vintage lock.
Then we got the idea of building a tiny home on the property out back. We had purchased the woods behind us to add on to our lot, part of getting our home back to its original story. Over the years it had been subdivided, and we were getting it back to the original lot lines on the old plat maps. We talked to Jay Green, the building inspector, about the lot replatting, and then he looked around.
Wow, this would be a great place for a playhouse for the grandchildren.
That clicked. Yeah.
It's perfect, and it's the only place on the property with a mountain view.
So we thought we'd build a tiny house for the grandchildren. We thought we'd build it entirely from old material and pallets.
We thought we could build a playhouse, off the grid, the whole thing, all recycled, a tiny house. Mm-hmm.
We thought, since we'd gotten pretty experienced using old stuff, that we could give it a shot. We ended up with a vast collection of about 100 pallets and doors. But what we found was it's more work to use pallets structurally than we could handle.
We did what we could, but in the end it ended up mostly new construction, modern construction.
We did buy another door from the Heritage Alliance.
Okay.
The front door and 3 windows were repurposed, but we had to pay to haul away all those recycled pallets. Live and learn.
What we have in the end, though, is a beautiful home with lots of stories and a friendship garden to go with it. If you want a peek, stop by sometime and we'll show you around.
You two really do have a remarkable home with so many stories. I mean, if only those walls and doors could talk. Anyway, what a story about restoring and renewing, and even starting anew. Thanks, Deb and Dawn, for sharing that all with us. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to A Night with the Jonesborough Yarn Exchange on WETS 89.5 FM out of Johnson City. And we're back, and boy, have we got a treat for you. All the way from Buffalo, South Carolina, please help me welcome to the stage Freddie Vanderford and Brandon Turner, the Legacy Duo.
Meet me in the bottom, bring my boots and shoes, Lord, mama, great almighty. Meet me in the bottom, bring my boots and shoes. I gotta go now, ain't got no time to lose. Gotta leave here, can't stay around no more, Lord, mama, great almighty. Gotta go now, can't stay here no more. I don't mind it, but I got so far to go. She right down on the ground, Lord and mama, great God almighty, the woman I love. She right down on the ground. Every time she kissed me, she made my love come down. She wore the number 4 shoes, 25 in the waist, Lord and mama, great God almighty, number 4 shoes, 25 in the waist. Ain't found nobody to take that little girl's place. Tell me about it. Name is Lily Mae, Lord and mama, great God almighty, woman I love. Name is Lily Mae. But the woman I hate, I see her every day. frozen down inside a block of ice. Well, the boll weevil up and told that farmer, he said, man, you ain't treating me too nice. Well, so the farmer, he got a boll weevil. He called him an old boll weevil. He throwed him down inside a frying pan. Yeah, the farmer got the boll weevil, y'all, and he throwed him down inside the frying pan. Well, that boll weevil up and told that farmer, he said, there you go, now you're treating me like a natural man. Make me want to sing. Boll weevil here, boll weevil there, boll weevils everywhere. Boll weevil here, y'all, boll weevils everywhere. Well, I looked down in my cotton patch and I found them old boll weevils on down in there. You want that, brother? Come on. He said, go on, man, and ride your Ford machine. Yeah, the boll weevil, he told that farmer, he said, you can go on now and ride your Ford machine. Yeah, cause when I get done with your cotton fields, you won't even be able to buy no gasoline.
Thank you so much, guys. That was a party, wasn't it? Yeah. And don't worry. They'll be back again later on in the show.
What's new? Well, let me tell you, being from a military family, we have experienced what's new all the time, don't we, Chelsea?
Yes, I'm always making new friends.
Yes, we never know what we might or where we might be stationed next. So our lives are always about what's new. We get used to new foods and new cultures at new places and different places that we go. And we also bring little pieces of those places with us when we leave. Home is where your heart is. And I've left a little piece of my heart in all of the towns we've had a chance to live in. There's always something wonderful to love if you look close enough. I'm always ready for the new adventure waiting for us.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you, Kate. Lori, we've got Dana here with another story. We've heard stories now about what's recycled and what's new. This one falls under the category of what's used.
When I was a child growing up in the 60s, my family was the proud owners of a turquoise and white Chevy station wagon. This vehicle was the family vehicle in which so many memories were made.
Like piling up blankets in the back and heading to the drive-in theater.
Or fighting over getting to be in the way back on the trips to Florida each summer.
I liked when we all sang together.
This station wagon was vivid in most of my childhood memories, and as it got older, as we did ourselves, I especially remember what all it took to keep it alive.
What's wrong, Daddy?
I need to stop for another can of oil. This thing needs a can of oil every 100 miles. Oh no, not rain too.
What's wrong, Daddy?
Oh, wipers are getting finicky. I have to slap off the wipers to get them working again. I'll just pull over and get out. Oh, what now? The door won't open.
I forgot to tell you, dear, the door's having a bit of a problem. You just have to lift the door up a little to open it or close it.
I don't even know why we're still hanging on to this pile of metal. I have half a mind to take it down the road and sell it right now.
No!
All right then. Well, I've got to make some adjustments at least, because I'm going to be like Fred Flintstone with my feet through the floor just to get it run pretty soon.
Dad wasn't too far off. There were some holes he could have stuck his feet through if he'd pushed hard enough. I remember pushing chicken bones through the rusty floorboard when Mom was driving down the interstate.
You kids, be sure you don't do that once we get closer to our neighborhood.
The thing was, this car was so much a part of us that we actually cried when it finally died and was laid to rest in the backyard. There it sat all autumn long. Then winter came and covered it with snow. But we knew it was there. One day, a few of our buddies were over and we were all sitting around thinking about what to do with the newly fallen snow. We all wanted to sled, but no one had one. And the only hill was right by the interstate. I don't honestly remember who came up with the idea first. All I do remember is my mom saying,
Interesting. Well, if you can pull it off, I approve. Just don't ask me to help you with that nonsense.
The idea was to give Old Blue, as the station wagon was come to be known, another chance at life. We were going to remove her hood, haul it to a likely hill near the interstate, and all jump on for a trip down. This was much easier in theory, let me say that. Finally, after a lot of tugging and hassles, the hood was removed and flipped on its top. Does anyone remember how solid those early cars were? Not like the Tupperware cars of today. Well, we changed it to the back of a friend's car and crept down the road, stopping periodically to shovel the snow out of it. When we finally got to the hill, we aimed it down, and with incredible anticipation, we all jumped on. What a ride! We smashed every bush in the way as we careened to the bottom. The sheer weight of that hood had us going 80 miles an hour going down, or so it seemed to us, and we did not lose a single man. At the bottom, we all tumbled off into the snow, laughing and shouting, thoroughly relishing in the joys of youth. It's then that we looked at the top of the hill at the car, and at the bottom of the hill at the hood. Someone put into words what we were all thinking.